The Honorable Judge Eleanor Vance presided over her courtroom like a sentinel standing guard over a sacred and brittle order. The wood of her bench was dark and polished to a mirror sheen reflecting the cold fluorescent light from above. Her robes were a symbol of her authority, a black wall separating her from the messy, unpredictable human lives that paraded before her. For 20 years, she had watched them all. The accused, the accusers, the lawyers, the weary families, all seeking a piece of justice in a world that rarely offered it clean. Her demeanor was known to be as unyielding as the marble in the courthouse lobby. She believed in the law, not as a flexible tool for compassion, but as a rigid framework for truth. On this particular Tuesday, the air in courtroom 2A was thick with the bureaucratic drone of a docket call. Case after case was a blur of legal jargon, plea bargains, and adjourned hearings. The rhythmic rustle of papers and the low murmur of conversation in the gallery were the predictable sounds of her day. It was a tedious but manageable existence, until he appeared. He shuffled into the back row, a specter of the street. His coat, a canvas of grime and frayed edges, hung loose on his gaunt frame. A tattered baseball cap, its bill pulled low, shadowed a face etched with the lines of 100 forgotten hardships. He carried nothing but the weight of his own existence, a quiet, almost invisible disruption in a room so defined by its rigid formality. The bailiff, a young, earnest man named Chris, eyed him with a mix of practiced caution and genuine sympathy, but he said nothing, assuming the man would find his seat and leave at the appropriate time. For the first 30 minutes the man was a ghost, a silent figure in the background. But then, a small cough became a series of raspy hacking sounds. A low, incomprehensible mumble rose from his lips, and he began to rock back and forth, a slow, unsteady rhythm that made the bench creak. Judge Vance's gavel hung motionless in her hand, a silent threat. Her eyes, cool and assessing, flickered to the back of the courtroom. Her stare was a command, an invisible force field that demanded silence and stillness. The man, however, seemed to exist outside the reach of her authority. He wasn't defiant, he was simply disconnected, lost in a world no one else could see. His muttering grew louder. They forgot the code, the message, he whispered, his voice cracking. A ripple of discomfort spread through the gallery. Lawyers paused, witnesses shifted uncomfortably, and the bailiff's posture stiffened. The court had a rhythm, a cadence, and this man was a stone thrown into its calm waters. Bailiff, Judge Vance's voice was as sharp as a blade of ice. Remove that man from my courtroom. Chris the bailiff nodded and began to move. He was a veteran of this kind of situation, trained to handle disruptions with a firm but non-violent hand. He approached the man, a gentle authority in his step. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside," he said quietly, bending low so as not to cause a scene. The man didn't seem to hear him. He just continued to rock, his eyes dark and unfocused, fixed on some point in the middle distance. "Sir," Chris said again, a little louder, a hand on the man's shoulder. "I need you to come with me." The touch seemed to pull the man from his reverie. His head snapped up. His eyes, though cloudy with age and hardship, focused on Chris for the first time. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much and remembered too little. He looked at Chris's uniform, at the brass buttons and the straight lines, and a strange transformation began to take place. The slumped shoulders straightened, the rocking ceased, and the muttering stopped. The man rose to his full height, which was taller and more commanding than anyone had expected. The entire courtroom, sensing a shift in the air, fell silent. All eyes were on the judge, the bailiff, and the man. Judge Vance watched with a cold, professional detachment, ready to issue a more forceful command. She saw a man who was clearly suffering, but her primary concern was the sanctity of her court. The dignity of the law required that it not be held hostage by the unpredictable chaos of the street. The man turned his body to face the judge, his posture now ramrod straight. He took a single, deliberate step forward, his worn shoes making no sound on the polished floor. Then, with a slow, powerful motion, he lifted his right hand. His fingers snapped together, his arm straight, and he brought his hand to the tattered brim of his cap. It was a salute. Not a half-hearted gesture, but a textbook, perfect salute. The kind of salute you learn in basic training. A gesture of respect and duty, ingrained so deeply that it survives even when the mind fails. The air in the courtroom became a vacuum. The rustling of papers stopped. The low murmur of the gallery died completely. Chris froze, his hand still hovering in the air. Judge Vance, her hand still on her gavel, felt a jolt run through her. The man wasn't just a homeless person, he was a soldier. The salute was an act of profound, silent dignity. It was a statement that transcended his circumstances, a flash of the man he once was, a man who had served a higher purpose. For a moment, the grime on his coat and the exhaustion on his face were gone, replaced by the ghost of a uniform and the straight-backed pride of a man who had sworn an oath. Judge Vance's professional detachment cracked. She saw not a disruption, not a nuisance, but a person, a veteran, and a memory, sharp and sudden, flashed in her mind. Her own father, a colonel in the army, standing tall in his dress blues. She remembered the way he saluted the flag, the respect in his eyes, the unwavering posture, the same posture this man now held. She slowly, deliberately, put her gavel down. The sound was a soft click, but in the silence it was deafening. Her voice, when she spoke, was different. No longer a command, but a question. "Soldier," she said, her voice softer than anyone in her courtroom had ever heard it. "What is your name?" The man's salute held for a beat longer, then his hand wavered and slowly dropped. He blinked, as if coming back from a long distance. He looked at Judge Vance, his eyes struggling to focus. "Silas," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Sergeant, First Class Silas Thorne, United States Army." A low gasp was heard from somewhere in the gallery. Chris, the bailiff, had a look of understanding and sympathy on his face. He gently lowered his hand and stepped back. He was a veteran himself, and he recognized the look in Silas's eyes. "Sergeant Thorne," Judge Vance said, using his rank. "Why are you here today?" Silas looked around, his confusion returning. "The man, I was looking for the man. The good man," he mumbled, his voice fading. "He said he would help me with the papers. They said the papers were here, the discharge papers. They lost them." The court clerk, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, looked up from her computer, a frown of concentration on her face, a homeless veteran trying to sort out his discharge papers. It was a tale as old as time, a testament to the broken systems meant to support those who served. Judge Vance leaned forward, her elbows on the bench. "Sergeant Thorne, do you know what this place is?" He nodded slowly. "A court, a place for justice." His voice was a little stronger now, the old training seeping through the cracks in his mind. "And what is the name of the man you were looking for?" she asked, her tone gentle. Silas's brow furrowed in concentration, a pained expression on his face. "Mr. Thompson, I think a lawyer, a good man. He gave me a card, but I lost it." He patted his pockets frantically, a sudden panic rising in his eyes. "It's all right, Sergeant," Judge Vance said quickly, her voice a calm anchor. "We will help you find him. Bailiff, please bring Sergeant Thorne a bottle of water and a chair." Chris, relieved, moved quickly. He brought a chair to the front of the gallery, and Silas, his energy depleted, slumped into it with a weary sigh. A young lawyer, a woman from the public defender's office, came forward and offered to help. "Your Honor," she said, her voice a little shaken, "I know a few lawyers who work with Veterans Affairs. I could make a call." Judge Vance nodded. "Do that and find out if there is anything we can do to help Sergeant Thorne with his papers. I want this to be our top priority." The judge then turned to her clerk, a quiet authority returning to her voice. "Brenda, contact the Department of Veterans Affairs. Tell them we have a veteran in need of immediate assistance. I will hold this court in recess until he is taken care of." The courtroom buzzed with a newfound energy. The cold, sterile air had been replaced by a palpable sense of purpose. Judge Vance, who had been a symbol of rigid law, had become a symbol of something more, of compassion. As the morning progressed, the lawyers and court staff worked together. The public defender made calls. The clerk emailed and faxed documents, and Chris, the bailiff, sat with Silas, listening to his disjointed but heartfelt stories of a war he barely remembered. Finally, an hour later, a man from the VA arrived. He was a kind-faced social worker who specialized in helping homeless veterans. He sat with Silas, listening patiently as he talked about his missing papers and his son who never called. Silas, for his part, was calm. The chaos that had consumed him had been replaced by a quiet dignity. He had found his way to a place of justice, and in a way he couldn't have understood, he had received it. Not from a legal ruling, but from a simple act of respect. Judge Vance watched from her bench, a quiet observer to a profound transformation. She had entered the courtroom that morning expecting another day of predictable legal proceedings. She had been ready to act, to command, to enforce the rules. But a soldier's salute had stopped her cold. She had been reminded that the law was not just a cold set of rules. It was a tool, a powerful tool that could be used for good. And the people who came to her court, no matter how lost or broken, deserved a chance at a second chance. That day, the courtroom felt different. It was no longer just a place of rigid law and order. It was a place of humanity, of empathy, and of a quiet, profound grace. And Judge Vance, the sentinel of her court, had learned that sometimes the most powerful acts of justice are the ones that are not in the law books at all. The encounter with Sergeant Thorne stayed with Judge Vance long after the court recessed for the day. That evening, as she sat in her quiet, meticulously organized home, the image of Silas's perfect, dignified salute returned to her. It was a sharp contrast to the chaos and desperation she was used to seeing in her courtroom. It made her question her own unwavering belief in the law as a rigid, unfeeling framework. She thought about her father again, the colonel she had idolized. He had believed in duty, honor, and service above all else. He had also believed in a deeper kind of justice, one that transcended the law and was rooted in empathy. He had often told her, "Eleanor, the law is the skeleton, but compassion is the flesh and blood. Without both, you're nothing but a pile of bones." The words, long forgotten, resonated with her now. She picked up the phone and made a call to her clerk, Brenda. "Brenda," she said, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Do you still have that information on Sergeant Thorne?" Brenda, surprised by the late-night call, confirmed that she did. I have his contact information and the name of the VA social worker. He seems to be in good hands, Your Honor. Good judge, Vance said, but I want you to do something else. Find out about his son. Silas mentioned a son. The next day, Judge Vance arrived in her courtroom with a new energy, a quiet determination that puzzled her staff. She moved through the docket with her usual efficiency, but there was a new warmth in her eyes. She wasn't just a judge anymore. She was a woman on a mission. Brenda, with the help of the social worker, tracked down Silas's son. His name was Michael, and he was an architect living in the city, unaware of his father's struggles. He had become estranged from Silas after his mother's death, unable to cope with his father's spiraling mental health and the demons of his past. The social worker arranged for a reunion. Judge Vance, for the first time in her career, stepped outside her courtroom and into the lives of those she was meant to serve. She met Michael at a small coffee shop near the courthouse. He was a handsome man in his 40s, with the same haunted look in his eyes that she had seen in his father's. I don't understand, Michael said, his voice raw with a mix of confusion and anger. Why are you involved in this? What does my father's past have to do with you? Judge Vance looked him in the eye. Your father came to my court, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice gentle but firm. He was lost, and when he saw the bailiff, he saluted. It was the most perfect, beautiful salute I have ever seen. It reminded me of my own father, and it reminded me that the people who come into my court are not just cases, they are human beings. Your father, Mr. Thorne, is a human being who needs his son. He needs you. The words hung in the air, a truth Michael had long denied. He had tried to bury the past, to forget the man who had been a hero and had become a stranger. But Judge Vance's words, and the simple dignity of a man who had saluted in a courtroom, broke through his defenses. He wiped a tear from his eye, the first he had cried in years. What can I do? He asked, his voice a broken whisper. Judge Vance laid a hand on his arm. Go to him, she said. He's at the VA hospital. He's safe. He's getting help. But he needs you. He needs to know he hasn't been forgotten. And so, the story came full circle. Michael went to the hospital, and he found his father. The reunion was tearful and difficult, full of a lifetime of pain and regret, but it was also full of hope. The missing papers were found, and Silas's benefits were restored. He was given a room at a veteran's shelter where he could receive the care he needed. Judge Vance never saw Silas again, but she saw his story, and she saw the humanity in her courtroom every day. She started a program at the courthouse, a small initiative to connect homeless veterans with the legal and social services they needed. Her courtroom became a beacon of hope, a place where the law and compassion worked hand in hand, and every time she looked at her gavel, a symbol of her power and authority, she remembered the sound it made when she laid it down. It was a silent testament to a man who had lost everything but his dignity, and a soldier-esque salute that had reminded a judge that the most important law of all was the law of the human heart.